That night he understood that loving can be crueler than lying. The room's light was dim. The silence was heavy. It was the kind of silence that carries unspoken truths. He was lying in bed staring at the white ceiling. The monitors beside him made rhythmic sounds. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound was a reminder that time was running out. His breathing was irregular. His hands trembled slightly. He knew this was the moment he had avoided for decades. She was sitting beside him, his wife, the woman he had promised to love forever. Her eyes were red. Her hands gripped his tightly. She whispered words of comfort, words he didn't deserve to hear, because inside him there was a secret that weighed like lead, a secret that turned every day of happiness into a lie. And now, looking at her, he knew he had to tell her, had to free the truth before it was too late. For 42 years he kept it to himself. 42 years of fake smiles, of hugs loaded with guilt, of I love yous that hid something bigger. He built an entire life on a foundation of silence, and now that foundation was crumbling, because he was dying, and the dead don't take secrets. They only take regrets. She knew nothing. She believed the story he had told, the version he had created, the alternate reality they lived together. But truth always waits. It hides in the shadows. It awaits the right moment. And the right moment was now. On his deathbed, where there's no more time for lies, only time for the naked truth. He opened his mouth. The words got stuck in his throat. How do you say something that would change everything? How do you destroy decades of trust with a single sentence? He felt his heart race. The monitor responded. Beep, 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 beep. Faster, more urgent. She looked at him with concern. Is everything okay? She asked. He shook his head. No, nothing was okay, and never had been. But what was he about to reveal? What was the secret he'd carried for so long? Was it about love? About betrayal? About impossible choices and silent sacrifices? The answer was trapped in his chest, waiting to come out. And she, his beloved wife, was about to discover that the man she knew had never really been who she thought he was. The truth was coming, and nothing would be the same again. His name was Thomas Miller, an ordinary man. At least that's how he liked to introduce himself. He was 75 years old, gray hair, brown eyes that had seen too much, deep wrinkles that told stories he never shared. He worked his whole life as a civil engineer, built bridges, designed roads, created paths for other people to follow. But his own path was twisted, full of detours, full of secrets. Thomas was always a man of few words. He preferred listening to talking, observing to acting. That made him mysterious in others' eyes, but not in Sarah's eyes. Sarah Miller, his wife. She always said she could read his thoughts, that she knew every expression on his face, every sigh, every silence. But there was a place inside him she never reached, a locked part, kept under lock and key. And that part was exactly what kept him awake so many nights. They met young. Thomas was only 23. Sarah, 21. It was at a spring dance. She wore a light blue dress. He was nervous, awkward, but when their eyes met, something happened. Something he couldn't explain. It was as if the whole world stopped, and at the same time started spinning faster. They danced that night, talked until dawn, and 3 months later, he asked her to marry him. But there was something Thomas didn't tell that night, something that happened before they met, something that shaped who he was. He carried pain, a loss, a past he tried to bury, but the past never stays buried. It always finds a way back, to whisper in moments of silence, to appear in dreams, to transform joy into melancholy without warning. During all those years, Thomas built a perfect life, at least on the surface. He and Sarah had 2 children, Michael and Emily. They raised a happy family, took trips, celebrated birthdays, cheered achievements. But underneath all that normalcy, Thomas carried a weight that got heavier each year. With every "I love you," he said to Sarah. Every time she looked at him with those eyes full of trust, of admiration, of pure and unconditional love. He was a prisoner of his own choices, choices made long ago, choices that seemed right at the time. But were they? That question tormented him, especially now, on his deathbed, when there's no more time for justifications, when truth demands to be freed. And Thomas was finally ready to open the locked door, ready to show Sarah who he really was, even if it meant destroying the image she had of him. Because before being her husband, before being his children's father, before being Thomas Miller, the respectable civil engineer, he was someone else. He lived another life, a life he never mentioned, a life that now demanded to be acknowledged. Before it was too late. "I need to tell you something." The words came out trembling, weak, but firm enough to catch her attention. Sarah leaned closer. Her eyes searched his. "What is it, honey?" she asked tenderly. Thomas felt a lump in his throat. How to begin? How to explain 42 years of silence? He took a deep breath. The oxygen burned his lungs. "Before I met you, I had another life." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah blinked, confused. She didn't understand what that meant. "Another life?" she repeated. Her voice had a hint of nervousness. Thomas nodded slowly. Each head movement seemed to weigh tons. "I was married before you." The words fell like bombs. Sarah recoiled. Her hand released his for an instant. Her face went pale. "Married," she whispered. "You never told me that." Thomas closed his eyes. Memories returned like an avalanche. He was 21, newly graduated, full of dreams. He met someone, a woman named Rebecca Hayes. She was vibrant, full of life. They fell in love quickly, got married in a small ceremony. Simple, only close family. And for 2 years, they were happy. Or at least Thomas thought they were. Until everything fell apart. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" Sarah's voice was breaking. Tears were beginning to form. Thomas opened his eyes. He saw the pain on her face, the confusion, the feeling of betrayal, because it was too painful, he admitted. "Because when I met you, I wanted to start over, wanted to be someone else, someone without a past." Sarah shook her head. She was processing, trying to understand. But what happened to her? To Rebecca? And there it was, the question he dreaded. The question that would open all the old wounds. Thomas felt his chest tighten. The monitor accelerated again. Beep, 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 beep. Sarah looked alarmed at the machine. But Thomas continued. He had to continue. "She died, Sarah. Rebecca died." The words came out as a whisper, but they carried the weight of decades. Sarah covered her mouth with her hand. Her eyes widened. "How?" she managed to ask. Thomas looked at the ceiling again, as if the answers were written there. "It was a car accident. She was coming home from work. A rainy night. A drunk driver ran a red light." He paused, breathed. "She died instantly. I was home waiting for her for dinner. And then, the police knocked on the door." Sarah was crying now. Tears rolled down her face. She didn't know what to say, how to react to this revelation. "I was destroyed," Thomas continued. His voice was just a thread. "I spent 2 years in deep depression, lost my job, almost lost the will to live. My family helped me, made me seek help, and gradually I came back. But I decided something in those dark days." He looked directly at Sarah. "I decided that when I found someone again, I wouldn't bring the past with me. I would be new, clean, without baggage. But there was more, much more." And Sarah was about to discover that this revelation was just the tip of the iceberg, because the real conflict wasn't that Thomas had a wife before her. The real conflict was in what he did after, in the choices he made, in the lies he built, and in the truth that now threatened to destroy everything they built together. Sarah stayed silent for long minutes. She looked at her own hands, processing, trying to fit the pieces of a life she thought she knew. Thomas watched every expression, every movement. He saw the confusion, the pain, the feeling of being deceived. 42 years, she finally said. Her voice was strange, distant. 42 years, and you never thought it was important to tell me. It wasn't a question. It was a statement, a silent accusation. Thomas tried to reach for her hand, but Sarah pulled away. It was a subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but he felt it, like a stab. "Sarah, he began, but she raised her hand, asking for silence. "I need a moment," she said, and then she stood up, walked to the window, looked outside. The night was dark. No stars, as if the sky was in mourning too. Thomas wanted to call her back, wanted to explain better, but the words wouldn't come. Out in the hallway he heard footsteps, low voices of nurses. Hospital life continued, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that room. Sarah breathed deeply by the window. Her shoulders rose and fell. She was trying to calm down, trying not to fall apart, because she was strong, always had been. But now, for the first time in decades, she felt fragile, vulnerable, as if the ground had been pulled out from under her feet. "You know what's worse?" she said without turning. Her voice echoed against the glass. "It's not that you had a wife before, it's not even that she died." She paused. "It's that you didn't trust me. For all these years. You thought I wasn't strong enough to handle your past." Thomas felt tears burn his eyes. She was right. He had underestimated her. Underestimated their love. "I was afraid," Thomas admitted. His voice was failing. "Afraid you'd see me differently. Afraid Rebecca's shadow would stand between us. Afraid of," he swallowed hard, "afraid of losing you too." Sarah finally turned. Her eyes met his, and what he saw there broke his heart. It wasn't anger. It was disappointment. And disappointment hurts more than anger, because anger can be healed. Disappointment leaves permanent scars. She returned to the chair, sat down slowly, but kept her distance, as if she needed space, air. "Is there anything else?" she asked. Her voice was controlled, firm, but Thomas knew that tone. It was the tone she used when she was protecting herself, when she was building walls. "Is there more?" she repeated when he didn't respond immediately. And Thomas knew there was more. Much more. Because Rebecca's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was the beginning of a series of decisions. Decisions that changed who he was. Decisions that transformed him into the man lying in that bed. And those decisions had consequences. Consequences Sarah deserved to know. Even if it meant she'd never look at him the same way again. Even if it destroyed what remained of their time together. Sarah took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something different there. A softness, an acceptance. "Look," she said, "I understand. You lost someone you loved. It was traumatic. You wanted to protect yourself." She reached out, touched his arm gently. "I just wish you had trusted me before, but I understand." Thomas felt a wave of relief, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. Maybe Sarah could forgive him. Maybe their love was strong enough. He held her hand, squeezed with what strength he still had. "Thank you," he whispered. "You don't know how much this means to me." Sarah smiled. It was a sad smile, but it was genuine. "We've been through a lot together, Thomas. 42 years don't get erased by one secret." She moved closer, adjusted his pillow, ran her hand through his gray hair. "You should rest," she said lovingly. "We've talked about it, now you can be at peace." Thomas felt tears flowing, tears of gratitude, of love, of momentary relief. Maybe he could die like this, having confessed his truth, having been forgiven. Maybe it was enough. But then, something happened. A nurse entered the room. She brought medications. "Good evening, Mr. Miller," she said cheerfully. "Time for your meds." Sarah moved back a little. The nurse checked the monitors, noted information on the clipboard, and then casually she asked, Your daughter stopped by earlier. She left a message saying she'll be back tomorrow morning. Sarah frowned. Emily was here? She asked. The nurse looked confused. No, the other young woman. She said she was his daughter. Sarah looked at Thomas. Confusion on her face. Other young woman? Thomas felt his blood freeze. No. Not now. Not like this. The nurse sensed the strange atmosphere. Oh, sorry. I must have gotten confused. Maybe she said niece, and left quickly, leaving a heavy silence behind. Sarah didn't take her eyes off Thomas. The softness from moments ago had disappeared. In its place, there was suspicion, fear. Thomas, she said slowly. Who was here today? He couldn't answer. His mouth was dry, his heart racing. The monitor screamed his agony. Beep, 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 beep. Sarah stood up. Thomas, answer me. And he knew the false hope was over, that the moment of peace was just an illusion, because the complete truth was knocking at the door, the truth he still hadn't told, the truth about what happened after Rebecca's death, the truth about the life he built before meeting Sarah. And this truth had a name, had a face, had a daughter. The storm was just beginning. I have a daughter. The words came out like a final confession, like a last breath of air before sinking. Sarah froze, her eyes fixed on him, incredulous. You have what? She whispered. But she had heard perfectly. Thomas saw her world collapse, saw the woman he loved shatter before him. Rebecca was pregnant when she died, but the baby survived. They did an emergency C-section. She was born premature, but she survived. Sarah staggered, grabbed the chair to keep from falling. Her breathing was irregular, gasping. You have a daughter, she repeated, trying to make the words make sense. And you never, in 42 years, you never told me? Thomas wanted to die right there, wanted the disease to take him at that instant, because seeing Sarah like this was worse than any physical pain. I couldn't, he said. I couldn't look at her without seeing Rebecca, without remembering everything I lost. So you abandoned her? Sarah's voice was different now, hard, cold, full of a rage he'd never seen. You abandoned your own daughter? Thomas shook his head desperately. No, I didn't abandon her. My parents raised her. She grew up with them. I helped financially. Sent money every month, but I couldn't be present. I was broken, Sarah. Totally destroyed. Sarah started pacing back and forth, hands in her hair, trying to process, trying to understand. You raised Michael and Emily, she said. Her voice trembled. You were a present father to them. You went to soccer games, school presentations. You were there for every birthday, every important moment. She stopped, looked at him with tears streaming. But for her? For your first daughter? You were nothing. Thomas felt every word like a stab, because they were true. Truths he had hidden from himself for decades. When I met you, he began, I wanted to start over completely. Wanted to be a different man. And when Michael was born, I promised myself I'd be the father I couldn't be for her. But that doesn't justify anything. I know that. Sarah laughed. It was a bitter laugh, without humor. Do you at least know her name? Olivia, Thomas said quietly. Olivia Rebecca Miller. He closed his eyes. She's 44 now. She's a doctor. Married. Has 2 children. Sarah stopped breathing for a moment. You know everything about her? Thomas nodded. My parents kept in touch. Sent me photos, updates. And in recent years, when they died, she started reaching out to me, trying to reconnect. Sarah sat heavily, as if her legs wouldn't support her anymore. She was here today. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. Thomas confirmed. Yes, she found out I'm sick, wanted to say goodbye. I saw her for the first time in decades. The silence that followed was absolute, oppressive. It was the silence of trust being destroyed, of love being tested beyond its limits. It was the silence of a 42-year marriage facing its biggest crisis. Do our children know? Sarah asked with a broken voice. Thomas shook his head. No, nobody knows. Only my parents knew. And now, you. Sarah covered her face with her hands, sobbed. Deep sobs that came from a place of indescribable pain. Thomas wanted to comfort her, but he didn't have that right. Not anymore. He had lost that right the moment he chose silence over truth. The moment he chose his own peace over honesty. I don't know who you are, Sarah finally said. She lifted her face. Her eyes were red, swollen. The man I married wouldn't do this. The man I loved wouldn't be capable of this. Thomas felt his heart break, because she was right. The Thomas she knew was a construction, an edited version, a carefully maintained lie. And now, the truth was there. Naked, cruel, destroying everything in its path. Sarah left the room, said she needed air, needed to think. Thomas was alone. Alone with his thoughts, alone with the weight of his choices. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. But now each sound seemed like a judgment, a condemnation. He looked at the white ceiling, and for the first time in decades he allowed himself to really think, really feel, really face what he had done. Olivia, his first daughter. He remembered the day she was born, remembered holding her for the first time. So small, so fragile, weighing only 4 pounds. The doctor said it was a miracle she survived, but to Thomas it didn't feel like a miracle. It felt like a cruel reminder. Rebecca was dead, and that baby was all that remained of her. Every time he looked at Olivia, he saw Rebecca's eyes, Rebecca's smile, and the pain was unbearable. So he ran. That was the truth. He didn't just start over. He ran, let his parents raise the girl, visited sporadically, but always keeping distance, always protecting himself. And when he met Sarah, he saw a chance to be happy again, to build a family without ghosts, without pain, without constant reminders of everything he'd lost. But in doing so, he didn't just hide his past. He abandoned an innocent child. Thomas thought about Michael and Emily, his children with Sarah. He was a present father to them, loving, dedicated, and that made everything worse, because it meant he was capable of being the father Olivia needed, but chose not to be. Not because he couldn't, but because he didn't want to face the pain, because his own peace was more important than a child's needs. This revelation destroyed him inside, more than the disease ever could. He imagined Olivia growing up, asking her grandparents about her father, the father who sent money but never showed up, the father who wasn't at birthdays, graduations, important moments. He imagined her confusion, the rejection she must have felt. And then he imagined her courage, the courage to seek him out anyway, to want to know the father who abandoned her, even after everything, even after years of absence. Tears flowed freely now down Thomas's face, not tears of self-pity, but tears of true regret, of shame, of late understanding. He had been a coward, had chosen the easy path, and in the process hurt 2 women he loved. Sarah, by hiding his truth, and Olivia, by denying her a father. He built his happiness on someone else's pain, and now, at the end, this truth was inescapable. But there was something else forming inside him, something beyond guilt. It was a burning desire to fix things, to do right, even if it was too late, even if Sarah never forgave him, even if he only had days to live. He needed to try, needed to find a way to redeem something, to show Olivia she was always important, that the mistake was his, never hers. And he needed to show Sarah that, despite everything, the love he felt for her was always real. Even built on lies, it was real. Thomas closed his eyes, and for the first time in 42 years, he allowed himself to remember Rebecca completely. Not with pain, but with gratitude. She gave him Olivia, a gift he didn't know how to value, but now finally he was ready to acknowledge and honor, before it was too late, before death took him, and took with it any chance of redemption. Hours passed. Dawn arrived silently. Thomas couldn't sleep. Just waited. Waited for Sarah to return. For her to decide what to do. He wouldn't blame her if she didn't come back. If she chose to leave. Let him die alone with his secrets. It would be fair. It would be what he deserved. But then the door opened. And she was there. Her eyes still red. But there was determination in them. A resolution he didn't expect. "I want to meet her," Sarah said without preamble. Thomas blinked. Confused. "What?" Sarah approached. Sat in the chair. "Olivia. I want to meet her. Before it's too late." Thomas felt his heart race. "Sarah, you don't have to do this. I understand if you just want to." But she interrupted him. "It's not about what I want to do. It's about what's right. She's your daughter. She deserves to say goodbye to her father. And I need to see, need to understand." Thomas couldn't believe it. After everything he had done, after all the lies, Sarah was still there, still trying to do right. "You're incredible," he whispered. Sarah shook her head. "I'm not. I'm destroyed. I'm angry. I'm hurt in ways I didn't even know were possible." She paused. "But 42 years means something. And if we're going to end this, we're going to end it with the truth. All of it." They called Olivia. It was 3 a.m, but she answered on the first ring, as if she'd been waiting. "Hello?" Her voice was soft, careful. "Olivia," Thomas said. His voice failed. Sarah wants to meet you." Silence on the other end. A silence loaded with emotion. "She knows?" Olivia finally asked. "Yes," Thomas confirmed. "She knows everything now." More silence. And then, "I'm coming." Half an hour later, Olivia entered the room. She was tall. Brown hair, green eyes, Rebecca's eyes. Sarah stood up. The two women stared at each other. There was so much unspoken between them, so much to process. But Sarah took the first step, extended her hand. "Olivia." "I'm Sarah." Olivia took her hand. Her eyes shone with contained tears. "I know who you are. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cause trouble." Sarah shook her head. "You didn't cause anything." "He did." She looked at Thomas, not with anger, but with sadness. "He kept us apart, but it doesn't have to be like this." She turned to Olivia again. "Tell me about you, about your life." And Olivia told about growing up with her grandparents, about becoming a doctor, about her husband, her children. And as she spoke, Sarah listened, really listened. And Thomas watched the two most important women in his life finally connecting. "I always wanted a sister," Emily had said once. Thomas remembered that now, and felt a new wave of guilt. Because Olivia could have been part of the family. Michael and Emily could have known their older sister. But he robbed them of that. Robbed them out of fear, out of cowardice, out of selfishness. "Sarah," he said with a weak voice, "I want Michael and Emily to know. I want them to meet Olivia." Sarah looked at him. There were tears in her eyes. "We'll call them in the morning," she said softly. And then she did something Thomas didn't expect. She took Olivia's hand, and his hand, and brought all three together. "You made terrible mistakes, Thomas," she said. Her voice was firm but gentle. "Mistakes that hurt people. Mistakes I can't simply forgive with words." She squeezed their hands. "But you're trying to fix it now, in your last moment. And that means something." Olivia looked at her father, for the first time with true understanding. "I spent years angry at you," she admitted. "Spent years wondering what I did wrong. Why you didn't want me." Thomas cried, sobs that shook his entire fragile body. "You didn't do anything wrong," he managed to say. "Never did. The mistake was always mine. And I'm sorry. So sorry." Olivia leaned in, hugged her father for the first time in decades. And Thomas held her like he should have held her 44 years ago. Sarah watched them, tears flowing freely, because despite the pain, Despite the betrayal, there was something beautiful happening there. There was healing. There was forgiveness. Not the easy kind, but the real kind. The kind born from pain and grown through truth. And in that moment, in that hospital room at 4 a.m, a broken family began to mend, in a way that could never have happened without the truth. Thomas died 3 days later, but he didn't die alone. Sarah was by his side, Olivia too. And when Michael and Emily arrived, they met the sister they never knew they had. The initial pain gave way to curiosity, to acceptance, and eventually to a new kind of family love. Thomas saw this, saw his family expand in his final moments, and for the first time in decades, he felt true peace. Not the false peace of silence, but the real peace of revealed truth. At the funeral, Sarah spoke. She told the truth, all of it. Didn't hide Thomas's mistakes, but also didn't hide his love. He was an imperfect man, she said. A man who made terrible mistakes, who hurt people he loved. But in the end, he found courage to be honest. And that courage gave us something precious. She looked at Olivia. It gave us the truth. And with truth, the chance to really know each other. Olivia stood beside Michael and Emily throughout the ceremony. 3 siblings, united by pain, but also by hope. They began meeting regularly after that, building bridges their father never built. Olivia's family met Sarah's family. And slowly, something new was born. It didn't replace what was lost, but it created something different, something real, something honest. Sarah kept the letters Thomas wrote in his final days. Letters to Olivia, asking forgiveness, explaining not to justify but to give context. Letters to herself, thanking her for 42 years, acknowledging the betrayal, but reaffirming the love. She read those letters when anger threatened to return, when the hurt seemed unbearable, and they helped. Didn't erase the pain, but reminded her that even in the most imperfect situations, love can be real. Months later, Sarah and Olivia were having lunch together. It had become a weekly ritual. "Did you forgive him?" Olivia asked one day. Sarah thought, really thought. "Not completely," she admitted. "There are still days that hurt. Days I feel betrayed." She paused. "But I'm trying. Because holding on to anger only hurts myself. And because, in the end, he tried to fix it. It wasn't enough. But it was something." The lesson that emerged from that experience wasn't about easy forgiveness. It wasn't about automatic second chances. It was about something deeper, about the price of silence, about how secrets poison not just those who keep them, but everyone around. Thomas spent 42 years thinking he was protecting his family. But actually, he was building a prison for himself, for Olivia, and eventually for Sarah too. Unspoken truths don't disappear. They just grow, get heavier, more destructive. And when they finally emerge, they cause more damage than they would have if told from the beginning. Thomas learned this too late, but his story became a reminder for his children, for Sarah, for everyone who heard it. A reminder that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing the right thing even when it hurts, even when it's hard, even when everything in you screams to stay silent. And as Sarah placed flowers on Thomas's grave that spring afternoon, she thought about the irony. He spent his life building bridges for other people, civil engineer, creator of pathways. But the most important bridges, the ones connecting the people he loved, he left burned. Until, at the last moment, he found strength to rebuild them. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough for love to find a way through the pain. And maybe, just maybe, that was redemption. Because in the end, we're not defined only by our mistakes. We're also defined by what we do when we finally face them.